I am your host, Cliff Garner, and as you can see, I have gotten a new chop. It's shortest I've worn it in 3 years. 3 years ago, I cut it all off after coming back from Turkey, and I grew it and grew it and grew it, and that's what I ended up with. Is what you saw just the other day. I cut off a ponytail about 16 inches long. It's going to Locks of Love, and from about here up, she shaped it up. My new hairdresser. I think she did a very fine job. I like what she did, and there was a ton of hair on the floor, but it was all kind of just clippings and stuff, so it wasn't very useful for a wig. But the ponytail will be a nice one to send off, and so that's where that's going. Yeah, I'll play around with it. I think this time around, I didn't really do very much as far as kind of trimming it up and trying different styles and things. I just kind of pulled it back as soon as I could pull it back and kind of tucked it away, and it would fall out of the ponytail holders and the hairpins and everything else. It just fall out of that for a few months, and then next thing you know, it all kind of came together. So I mean, I've done that with my hair for years. I tend to like it long, but this is a nice change in this time of year with it being warm like it is. It's rather pleasant, and I'm enjoying the difference. Not only that, a lot of weight off my head. That's several pounds, I'm sure. But it was starting to get. I mean, I'd wear it down and it'd stick in my armpits and stuff. So it was time to cut it. That's about my measure of like haircut time. It's like, it's cut in my armpits when I move. Time to go. So that's the deal. It's gone. Plus, I shaved off the rest of it. I just couldn't. I don't know. I couldn't agree with myself on anything that was all that good as far as the facial hair. So it was time for all that to go. I got some more shaving cream, so I'll keep it shaved off through the summer. Maybe we'll see. We'll see how industrious I am on shaving. I get really lazy with that and grow it and shave it and grow it and shave it. So whatever. But I've been for quite a while now. I've been one that's been swearing by using either a straight razor or using what we call a safety razor, which is the old double-bladed, blade on each side. Good old-fashioned razor, where you just pull the razor blade out and put a new one in, put the top back down, and there you go. Old school. Better shave. Much better shave. The straight razor, I get a little too frisky with, so I don't use it very often. But yeah, I do. I got the belt and the whole shot. It's pretty cool. And nothing else, I can use it for self-protection, actually. And it's good for that. Very good for that. Stealthy too. You don't hear that snick when you pop the straight razor out. There's not that little that click. It's silent and deadly. So anyway, I just figured I would do a little bit on Turkey, of course. That being my one of my obsessions. And I got a couple articles I want to go over. Just kind of keep you up on things going with the place. The first one I have here is an opinion piece from Clarion Project. It's by a fellow named Zach Huff, dated Tuesday, June 6, 2017. I came across this just kind of doing some Fairly recent research. Actually, I found it several days ago. Please read, Mr. President, Turkey Terror Primer. And it says, in a joint statement with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan at the White House last week, U.S. President Donald Trump declared, "We support Turkey in the first fight against terror and terror groups like ISIS, the Islamic State, and the PKK, Kurdistan Workers' Party, and ensure they have no safe quarter." By which measure of conduct, which relativism are we judging these organizations, from ISIS to the PKK? Since it is Turkey that the White House has just reiterated support for, it's time for a refresher on Turkey's record on terrorism, genocide, and human rights. Let's start with Turkish support of jihadist groups. In Syria, Turkey and Saudi Arabia are primary sponsors of al-Qaeda-affiliated jihadists, including the Jaish al-Fatah, the Army of Conquest, Ahrar al-Sham, and the al-Nusra Front. Out of those, al-Nusra is the Syrian franchise of al-Qaeda. They are directly tied to that organization. The other two are also connected. Al-Sham, by the way, Sham comes from Shamash, which is the old the Semitic name for the sun. And Al-Shams is really the name for the Levant, which is eastern Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Waruk or Uruk, right? Iraq is the other part of that equation, I suppose. Saudi Arabia is the Arabian Peninsula, and Egypt, of course, is quite another area altogether. Same with North Africa. And there are Arabs that live all through those. But Shams, yeah, that sun. And that's why ISIS is ISIS. Al-Shams is the Levant. And so that's why it's also called ISIL, because the Levant replaces Shams. Anyway, back to the article. Not quite freedom fighters. These groups compete with ISIS for the mantle of who gets to establish the Islamic Caliphate. Many are designated terrorists by the U.S., Russia, and Syria. They are Islamists that American taxpayers have already paid to bomb, which our allies are funding, arming, and providing intelligence to. Okay, and Turkey's been doing this for quite a while now. When Turkey says that America should support its alternative options to the Kurds to defeat ISIS, these jihadists are the forces it is actually referring to. That is what they're doing. They don't like the YPG because they're Kurdish, and they claim that they are part of the PKK. The U.S. and Turkey both recognize the PKK as terrorists, and they've been around for a long time. The YPG, no. America does not agree with Turkey on this, and this still remains a really big thorn in the side of the Turks in any agreements with us and in doing anything in the Middle East, and this has been a pretty serious problem. But Russia recognizes neither one of them, those Kurdish groups, as being terrorists. However, they do recognize these other three and ISIS, so those four, which really constitute the largest part of what we are calling the Free Syria Army. This is all the Free Syria Army, which is it just changes uniforms and changes rhetoric depending on who they're talking to. Okay. And you can't trust them, I don't think. Personally, I despise them. Anyway, but that's what the Turks are talking about. They want Jaish al-Fatah, Ahrar al-Sham, or the al-Nusra Front, or ISIS to be supported. And they don't want to talk about ISIS because they make claims of their own about ISIS. But they're supporting them. They are supporting them. That is a fact. There is a town called oh goodness, it's right around Antioch. Oh, what is that? Can't think of it now. But there's a town there that's where they're buying and selling slaves, and they're buying and selling oil. Fact. On the border between Syria and Turkey. And Rayhanla, Rayhanl, Rayhanla. So anyway, let me return to the article. It shouldn't come as a surprise then that Turkey is also a longtime ally of Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood affiliate ruling the Gaza Strip, and a designated terrorist organization in both the U.S. and the EU. In 2011, Hamas established a recruitment and planning base in Istanbul. I remember when they did that. Turkey harbors countless Hamas terrorists exiled from Israel and Moldova to provide the jihadist group with $300 million annually. For almost a decade, Turkish security forces even supported the Turkish Hezbollah. Just last week, President Erdogan called on the Muslim world to flock to Jerusalem to protect it against attempts at Judaization. Okay, let me back up a little bit here. Hamas is connected directly to, the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood was formed in Egypt back in the 1920s. And it immediately had pretty much affiliates all through the Arab world. It didn't work in the Turkish world. The Turkish world was still dealing with, was actually just beginning to deal with the ascendance of Ataturk. And secularism in Turkey was a very important thing. Women's rights. Turkey gave women shocking rights at a very early point, earlier than most of Europe did. This is a fact. You can look it up. Ataturk had his problems, but his view of women's rights was very advanced. Very advanced. And he got rid of the hijab back then in the 1920s and 1930s. He did some great things. He also did some very bad things, and a couple stupid things actually. But most of what he did was actually was pretty good actually. I have a great amount of regard for the man. I studied his life, and he, for all his vices and problems, there was so much to admire about him, and that what he was trying to do was gargantuan. It was a great effort to modernize Turkey, and just incredible. So at the time that Egypt was beginning to examine these ideas that became the Muslim Brotherhood, you had the ascendancy of Ataturk. However, in time, Turkey had areas and factions that were more, I don't know that I want to use the word susceptible, but they were more open to the ideas of the Muslim Brotherhood. And it crept into these political parties beginning in the 50s, but really picking up steam in the late 60s and early 70s, and actually coming really to fruit probably more in the 90s, and with the what is it, Felicity Party? No, that's Sadat. I can't think of the name of the party now. but it was the predecessor to the one that formed into the AKP. And Erdogan was the mayor of Istanbul, and he rose up from actually my neighborhood, my general neighborhood when I was living there. He was in Kasımpaşa, and I was next door in oh goodness, I forget the name of the place I live. Haskoy, yeah, crazy town, or Royal Village, however you want to look at it. And yeah, I was like next hill down, and at any rate, working class area, very tough neighborhoods. Not all of it was really bad, but there was pretty rough areas right around there, and especially in Kasımpaşa. He came to the top in a poor area that a lot of these kids live by their fists. I mean, it's just the way it is. So, at any rate, but he was part of the political movements that came to fruition in the 90s that eventually formed the AKP. And that these came from a melding of Turkish politics and nationalism with these really pan-Muslim ideological ideas, and that was one of the reasons why Morsi, I mispronounced it last time, in Egypt was Erdogan's ally. He was also his rival, and there was some tension between them when Obama backed them against Mubarak and ousted Mubarak, and the people of Egypt rejected Morsi and what he was doing. The violence against Christians was accelerating at a very frightening rate, and there were other things too. The Egyptians were like they were hoping for something better, and they were very disappointed with what they got. So they rejected all that. But prior to that fall, prior to his actually the hubris that led to his fall, Morsi was called upon by the U.S. to mediate between Hamas in Gaza and the Israelis instead of bringing in Erdogan. This was a major snub to Erdogan, but and he was angry at Morsi until right up until the time that the military toppled him, and this. I don't think that Obama really proved what the Egyptians did, but he couldn't do a whole lot about it. And the Saudis were backing it. You're seeing where these divisions start showing, the cracks, the rifts between the different factions. And this is going to be important in a couple things I'm going to come up to here in just a little bit. But that rift between really Erdogan and the U.S., Erdogan and the Saudis, in Egypt and Turkey, these things would be are becoming increasingly important, and there's this rift that's going even further, and it's because of this Muslim Brotherhood influence, and that's why tracing this down is really important, and suffice it to say, there are a lot of experts who consider the AKP to be one and the same as the Muslim Brotherhood. It is the Muslim Brotherhood in Turkey. And the reason for that is this cross-pollination that had occurred gradually after the death of Ataturk and Inonu, who was his successor, and the eventual disappearance of the immediate successors of Ataturk and his immediate group. Flaws and all. So, at any rate, there's that. So this Hamas connection with Erdogan is really key. We have to keep it in mind. It has to be up front. Hamas has been very close to Erdogan in his coterie. That's a fact. There's no getting around it. And when he did the Mavi Marmara, I think that was in 2010, I believe. When he did the Mavi Marmara, this was a deliberate provocation. I think his timing was a little off. I think he was hoping for more of a rolling response, because it came on the heels of Davos, where he attacked the Israeli prime minister publicly in Davos, which the Muslim street, as we call it, this Muslim street, in the Arab countries loved it, and actually the left in Turkey applauded as well. One of the creepiest things that I went through was walking downtown during one of their rallies in the immediate wake of the Mavi Marmara, and they were screaming about the Jews and kill the Jews and hate the Jews and the Jews are murderers and blah, blah, blah. And, I mean, it felt like I was walking through a Nazi rally. I really did feel that way. It was frightening. And they were yelling about the U.S. And there I am, an American, walking around in the middle of all this and hoping nobody really pays much attention to me. So that was quite an experience. And it should be kept in mind that this Hamas connection, very important, because of the Muslim Brotherhood. Also, he was giving them $300 million a year. Where's he getting that money? Well, there's he has been taking money from Erdogan has been taking money from the Saudis to promote Islam through the Balkans, among other things. And he is building a lot of mosques throughout the Balkans and putting in fairly radical preachers, actually. And the Saudis, I think that the money's starting to finally dry up, but he had been taking that from them for some time. But even more importantly, he has a group of backers within Turkey called the Anatolian Tigers, and what these are businessmen that have been very closely connected to Erdogan and the AKP, and they generally promote a very literal form of Islam, and that these are the guys that keep applauding Erdogan and using terminology about him that's probably not fit for proper Islam. I mean, he's being compared to God and to Allah, right? And to Muhammad himself, and this is where the talk of him being the Mahdi comes from. And the Mahdi is not as important a doctrine to Sunni Muslims as it is to Shiite. But there's Muslims in all through Islam that have latched onto this doctrine, and for whatever reason they have. For Erdogan, it's personal, and also he keeps attacking Israel and his attempts at Judaism. He and Davutoglu, before he went down for being a little too having too much spine, actually, for Erdogan's liking. He and Erdogan were, when they were still friendly, were threatening Israel because of the shrines, the Muslim shrines in Jerusalem, and they declared themselves the protectors of things like the Dome of the Rock. So this is really key to understanding where Erdogan is coming from. And the final thing out of that paragraph I want to point out, and they just only mention it, said for a decade Turkish security forces even supported the Turkish Hezbollah. This is true. Now Hezbollah is connected in Lebanon is connected to the Iranians. They're Shiites. Lebanon has a larger number of Shiites than most other areas of Sunni religious background. But you will find pockets all through of different sects that are connected in one way. The Seveners and the Twelvers, as they call themselves. I think the Twelvers are more allied with Shia. The Seveners tend to be a little bit more of a, I don't know what I want to say, an occult type of background, but they do tend to be more, shall we say, eclectic, I suppose, in some of their theological underpinnings, sometimes borrowing from Christianity or from Judaism or from Zoroastrianism, or even possibly something older, maybe more of a pagan kind of thing. Maybe sometimes even some resemblance to certain doctrines coming out of India sometimes. So at any rate, but the Hezbollah has been declared a terrorist organization within Turkey. There is a Turkish Hezbollah. I don't think it's tied to the Alevis, who are the main non-Sunni group outside of certain other Sufis, and of course the Yazidis. But they, at the same time, I do know that there was some connections, and the government trying to keep it hush hush, and there was always this whispering that they were Erdogan's oyun, their toy, puppet, kukla. Okay, back to the article. Vis-a-vis ISIS, Turkey has been widely accused of aiding the terrorist group by allowing free passage of its fighters and export of oil to the global market. And that is true. How did ISIS, while actively besieged by 68 nations who fought on both sides of World War II, manage to import 30,000 foreign fighters and export 40,000 barrels of oil a day on more than 1,000 tanker trucks? Good question. When America and NATO were finally allowed to use their Incirlik air base for anti-ISIS operations, nearly a year and a half after ISIS began its conquest of terror, the West was shocked at how decisively the Turkish Air Force began to use this newfound involvement to strike 400 Kurdish targets versus just 3 ISIS targets. See, that's what happened when we started. When we finally came in and started backing up the Turkish efforts, right? They were killing Kurds while we were trying to kill ISIS. And they shot down the Russian plane for bombing ISIS. Pretty naked. It really is. It's pretty naked. In just the first 3 days following the agreement. Hence, why it's a common joke that Turkey is the Air Force of the Islamic State. They are ISIS's Air Force. Around the same brief period, Turkey rounded up more than 6 suspected PKK combatants for every detainment of an ISIS subject. See, this is the timing of Erdogan's trying to assume power as a sole power. I think was pushed on him because the people within the Gulen organization started exposing his crimes and his corruption, which is extensive. I mean, he makes Hillary Clinton look clean. I'm serious. The man's a thief. And holy cow. But the thing was that he turned against the Kurds. He had when he ran for the office of president, he did that with taking power in mind. And again, I think he had to reach for it a little too soon because of the efforts of the Gulen group exposing him. With his son, Daddy. What do I do with the money in the shoe boxes? When all that came out, that was in 2013. 2014, he ran for president, and he reached out to the Kurdish party first. He didn't have enough on his own. Basically speaking, the AKP is about 40%. And that's politics. That's not in economics. That isn't to say that they agree with everything he does. But that 40% is pretty solid as backing. You have about 26 to 27%, maybe 28, backing the CHP, which is the Social Democrats, okay, and they're Kemalists, and they have some problems with the Kurds, but they're not quite as nationalistic as the MHP. And these guys would probably frighten anybody from the West with their not only nationalism but really racism. The Grey Wolves are from this group. Okay, they're the hardcore within it. And there's a lot of good people that back this group. I mean, they're not all a bunch of racists or anything, but they are very, very nationalistic. They're also very independent. They're more likely to turn away from Europe. The JHP, yeah, they've got their independent streak, but they basically see themselves as a social democratic party, much like the social democratic parties all over Europe. They see themselves in that vein. The MHP, well, they're closer to some kind of almost a quasi-fascist kind of a belief, and they're pan-Turkic. They want to unify all the Turkic people from China and Siberia and through all the stands all the way to Turkey, and unify them all into one great country and maybe take over the world. And they're about 18%, around it, they're about. And then you come to the Kurdish party, the HDP. They've gone through a couple different names, but they also are kind of social democrats. They're a little more, probably a little more on the liberal side, a little bit more, but not a whole lot. And they are multi-ethnic. There's Christian factions within, and all that. But the main thrust of that party is the Kurds. Okay, and they were openly courted. They're about 11-12%. And it fluctuates a little bit. And at any rate, when Erdogan ran for president and wanted to move all the powers of the prime minister to the presidential seat, he first allied with the HDP, which is the Kurdish party. And suddenly, you know, because all this stuff was coming apart, I think, something happened. And I'm not entirely sure what. I mean, there was sudden violence going on in the east, and it was coming from both sides. There were a couple incidents in which they were shooting at the Kurds were shooting at the military convoys. But they were also burning whole neighborhoods all of a sudden in places like Gaziantep, you know, in the east. And this turning on the Kurds caused him to lose significant backing. So when he had the next election, he lost power. He had his core of roughly about 40%. I think it was a little bit less. But he no longer had the backing of the Kurds. And if the Kurdish party, the MHP and the JHP, the Social Democrats and the Nationalists would have gotten together under one banner, they could have run the country. However, the MHP hates the Kurds. And the Kurds returned the favor, and both of them refused to work together. So it was just a matter of waiting it out, and Erdogan had the largest party. I mean, he didn't get a whole lot done, but he was able to pick up the pieces once again, and he turned to the MHP, and now he's forging the last links of becoming a full-fledged dictator. And this is on the heels of the so-called coup, which was just a little bit too handy for him, because it gave him the excuse and the wherewithal, really, to clamp down on the rest of the country. So you know, here's another link there, right? And when you look at what's happening with the Kurds, remember that he turned on the Kurds at the last minute, and that's part of this 6 suspected combatants and all that you know, for every detachment or for every rounded up ISIS member, that's what that's all about. He was still killing the Kurds. He was killing them in Turkey. And then when he got Obama to finally come in and assist him in Syria, Obama sent our troops over there to help the Kurds, and they were watching the Turks trying to kill them. So this is a very strange situation. But it's one that we can define and we can recognize for exactly what it is. And with the information I just gave you, you understand the political reasoning behind it all. Okay, and it says here, this is as old as the Turkish Republic. More than 3.5 million Eastern Christians were brutally massacred by Turkish forces surrounding the founding of the modern Turkish state from 1915 to 1923. And culminated with the boat lifting out of many Greek Christians during the attack on Smyrna. They burned Smyrna to the ground. I've been there, and I saw the waterfront, and I know pretty much the layout of all that. I'll talk about that again. Or I'll talk about that sometime, the different genocides there. That's very fascinating stuff. The Turkish government has refused to recognize these crimes, which probably makes ISIS turn back from black to green with envy. Just last year, the Turkish government seized every church in the million-person city of Diyarbakir as persecution of Christians continues. And he's forcing Christian kids into Imam Hatip schools where they have to learn the Quran. Yeah, that's no joke. That's what he's doing. Bastard. Soon after the Christian genocides, Turkish attention turned to the Kurdish question. See, these two things have been side by side for a long time. Promised the Kurdish state in the aftermath of World War I, the nascent Turkish entity would resort to anything to keep that from happening. Roughly 30,000 Kurds were massacred during the 1930s, followed by decades of systemic ethnic cleansing continue to the present day. But one of the things that Ataturk did was that he had said that the Kurds were not a separate ethnicity, but they were mountain Turks. But there's no relation whatsoever between the language of the Turks and the Kurds. That's a fact. The extreme methods of Turkification included the banning of the Kurdish language, music, dance, clothing, and even Kurdish baby names. When Leyla Zana became the first female Kurd elected to the Turkish parliament, she was sentenced to 15 years in prison for self-identifying as a Kurd at her swearing-in ceremony. Through ethnic cleansing of Kurdish areas, the Turkish government has eradicated as many as 4,000 Kurdish villages since 1984. And executed around 20,000 Kurdish citizens. Around 3 million Kurds have been summarily displaced and well over 500,000 since just mid-2015. This is after I left. And this is also what I'm talking about. That when he is striking the Kurds, this is what he was doing. He's displacing them, among other things. In 1978, the PKK was organized to resist this pattern of genocide and human rights abuses. Since then, the PKK's position has oscillated between demanding an independent Kurdish state to pushing for equal constitutional freedoms in Turkey. An independent study found that from 1989 to 1999, 1,205 civilians were killed by the PKK. A declining trend as strategies change. Killing civilians is wrong, yet the PKK's number is less than a rounding error compared to the number of civilians Turkey has killed. One is left in awe at how much the largest armed force in NATO and the current prospective EU member can get away with. This is the same Turkey that last month banned Wikipedia, where gays were beaten by police, and where the audience at a Radiohead party in Istanbul was assaulted by mobs for consuming alcohol. The thuggery is not contained within Turkish borders. For the second consecutive time, American protesters were viciously attacked by Erdogan's security detail during his visit to Washington last week. And we've talked about that. Turkey was praised by President Trump for having been a bulwark against the Soviet Union and as an ally in the war on terrorism. It's difficult to see how Turkey was any better to the Christians, Kurds, and non-Muslims. If Turkey were a moderate success story for a Muslim majority state, then what would it have been like if it were extreme? Let's hope President Trump's praise of Turkey was just as disingenuous as the sycophantic adoration lavished on him by President Erdogan. President Trump cannot be both tough on terrorism and continue about the Obama legacy of pampering Turkey. And it says Zach Huff is Clarion Project's Kurdish Affairs analyst. And this article was originally published in the Jerusalem Post and is reprinted with permission. I will put a link for that in the notes. Very important. The next one I'm going to look at here. Look at this article here, and this is in the current Period Daily News stuff. Let's see if there's a date on it. Yeah, June 29th, so this is brand new. It's by Murat Yetkin. He's a columnist with the Period Daily News. He's actually quite good. Will the Middle East map change again? And I've been saying it will. Let's see what he has to say here. The map of the Middle East was radically changed almost 100 years ago at the end of the First World War. It was redrawn from within the borders of the old Ottoman Empire. In fact, it was not only the Middle East that was affected. The First World War marked the end of the three important dynasties ruling three land empires of the Old World. The Romanovs of the Russian Empire, the Habsburgs of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottomans of the Ottoman Empire. So it's actually the maps of Central and Eastern Europe, Caucasia, Central Asia, and the Middle East that all changed a century ago. The map of the Caucasus and Central Asia was also changed once again after the Soviet Union disintegrated in 1992. Changes to the map of Central and Eastern Europe followed that, with a dramatic disintegration of Yugoslavia and the division of Czechoslovakia into two. Today, there are many conspiracy theories circulating about the possibility of a new wave of map changes in the Middle East. And it's not just conspiracy theories. This is a logical thing to actually examine, because this is actually what's happening because of the realignments of peoples and political affiliations in the Middle East. So to call it a conspiracy theory is actually just trying to paint it with a dark aura, actually. And when people talk about map change, the possibility of an independent Kurdish state is always debated. There have been a number of developments in the last 15 years that strengthen this thesis. For example, the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 helped the establishment of the Kurdistan Regional Government, KRG, in northern Iraq, led by Masoud Barzani, the head of the Kurdistan Democratic Party, the KDP. A more recent example is the U.S. Central Command using the People's Protection Units, the YPG, as its ground troops against the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, or Daesh in Syria. The YPG is a Syrian extension of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party. And this is actually a kind of doctrine within Turkey, particularly with the Erdogan government. He's kind of forced to write that, but at the same time, the CHP, which Hurriyet Daily News is kind of, not exactly the organ for, but is very aligned to them. This is actually kind of their doctrine as well. They are not very friendly to the Kurds, and especially after the fallout of events after they had the chance to unify, and neither the Kurds nor the MHP came together with them. A lot of bitterness there. So the YPG is the Syrian extension of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, which is on the U.S. list of terrorist organizations. The YPG is not. And so he's being real slick with the connotations here. The PKK was secretly founded in Turkey in 1978 with the aim of carving out territory from 4 neighborhood states, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria, for an independent Kurdistan. Will the PKK's effort in defeating ISIL now bring it autonomy in Syria? In a stretch of land that has a border of hundreds of kilometers with Turkey, what will happen to the competition between the PKK and the KDP over the Kurdish-populated areas of Iraq, which neighbor both Turkey and Iran? And this really is kind of a big issue, although we're not really given a whole lot of information on this. So I'll discuss this in a minute, but this dynamic is really important. It was mainly that competition which forced Barzani to recently announce plans for a referendum for independence from Iraq scheduled for September 25th. The timing of the announcement was rather unfortunate, as right after it, the diplomatic crisis broke out between Saudi Arabia and its allies and Qatar. Western governments saw that a Kurdish state in Iraq would immediately lead to a pro-Iranian Shiite state in the south of Iraq, including the oil and gas-rich Basra region, which could put additional pressure on Kuwait and Saudi Arabia while also further disturbing Israel. There are 2 additional factors that also make a Kurdish state difficult. The first one is the presence of thousands of Iranian Revolutionary Guards in the Iraqi and Syrian theater in support of the non-Sunni regimes in Baghdad and Damascus. The second one is the fact that the Turkish Republic is still alive and kicking, despite a number of attempts in the last 15 years to weaken its military. Any change in the map of the current Middle East could lead to a chain reaction, and no one can guess how or where that would stop. So the answer to the question in the title is not very likely, but unfortunately that is only likely to be understood after yet more bloodshed and pain. Okay, a couple things to take away here. First of all, The CHP, the Social Democrats, are forced by circumstances to back Erdogan internationally. They don't have a choice in this. And some of their interests coincide with his. Okay? First of all, they don't entirely trust the Kurds in any case. There is also the traditional tension between Kemalists and the Kurds. This is just part of the flora and fauna of the Middle East, and particularly in Turkey. Okay, it's just the way it is. There is a certain amount of goodwill between certain factions within the CHP and certain factions within the HDP that come together, not just politically, but because they are, I mean, they're social democrats. Come on, they buy into the basic liberal value system. A lot of liberals do not, but there is a pretty fair number of them that do. And there is that element, but at the same time, the majority of the CHP and its followers are not very friendly to the Kurds, and that they are very leery of them. Now, one of the things that's been going on all along, pretty much ever since the war in Iraq began, and Turkey was actually able to start doing anything, because the people refused to let Erdogan back Bush's efforts. But when the smoke cleared, the Turks started popping up in the northern parts of Iraq, and they were actually trying to work with the Kurdish regional government, the KRG, and they and the KDP has been, by and large, pretty well disposed towards the Turks. They've had deals with them on pipelines and gasoline sales and natural gas sales, things of this nature. And they've done quite a bit of business there. They also allowed the Turkish army access into northern parts of the country, chasing after the PKK. And there was a lot of dissension within the Kurdish community in both sides of the border there, that went to say, hey, these are boots on the ground. And so when the KRG allowed them in to hunt the PKK, one of the great ironies is that what followed was the ISIS attacks in Mosul, and that they, backed by Turkey no less, started murdering Christians, the Assyrian Christians there. They were also, and Erdogan hates Christians, but they were murdering Christians, they were murdering Kurds, and they were trying to, now ISIS wasn't really trying so hard with the Kurdish, not Kurdish, but with the Turkmens who live there. But the Turkish government was. And this was underplayed in the newspapers all over the world. But there were overtures made by the Turks, and the Turkmen, I don't think, were very friendly actually in receiving it, and they pretty much stayed out of things. But ISIS, on the other hand, has been very prominent in the Mosul area. In fact, they have taken over Mosul at times. So this is part of that dynamic. Keep that in mind. And that Qatar, by backing the Muslim Brotherhood, is allied with Turkey, backing the Muslim Brotherhood, backing Hamas in Gaza, which Egypt is against, Saudi Arabia is against. And now Iran, for some reason, is backing Turkey. There's something going on in this mix that's not explained yet. And I haven't found anything that tells me why. What, yes, but why, no. I'm keeping my eyes out on that. But I want you to see that this mess right there, and that whole continuum of coinciding ideas and factions producing new alliances, that there's something brewing here, and there's something yet that I haven't seen, and I'm trying to find out what it is. What's the deal with Iran? And how vis-a-vis Russia and Syria this is going to play out. A lot of the other parts are pretty easy to pick up, because it's really obvious about Iran hating Saudi Arabia and backing the Houthi in Yemen. But and I can see them getting on board with the Qataris. I can see them even getting on board with the Turks. But what's the deal with Syria? Because Iran and Syria have been very thick, and they're religiously connected. The Alevis are Southerners, I believe, and they're doctrinally similar to the Alevis of Turkey. Let's keep an eye on this, but I want you to see that, and that this breakdown is getting mighty interesting. There's more coming on this, but for now, I'll say good night.